The chipped formica of the diner booth felt cold under Ava's forearms. Rain lashed against the window, mirroring the turbulence in her stomach. Across from her, Special Agent Reynolds didn't bother with small talk. He hadn't in the 3 years she'd been with the Bureau, and certainly not since. Well, since Bucharest, Lollapalooza, Chicago. You're going in as music press. Reynolds slid a file across the booth. It wasn't thick, but the single sheet of glossy photos inside felt weighty. Young faces, radiating manufactured joy, all taken from social media. Bloom, Ava said, her voice raspy. She hadn't realized how dry her mouth was. Reynolds nodded, a tight movement. That is what we're calling it. Emerged 3 weeks ago in the rave scene around Milwaukee. It is spread quickly, synthetic opioid, but with variations. Labs can't pin down the exact compounds. Every batch is different. The photos showed concert goers, smiling, dancing, blissed out. One photo circled in red showed a young woman with vacant eyes being helped to her feet by a friend. Effects are all over the map. Euphoria, sensory amplification, paralysis, seizures, and a significant number of cardiac arrests. We've lost 4 so far, officially classified as overdoses, but the speed of escalation, it is not typical. Ava opened the file and read the accompanying report summary. A mess of chemical nomenclature she barely understood. The crucial part was the last sentence: potential for rapid neurological damage. Prognosis for survivors often includes permanent cognitive impairment. They are selling it at festivals, leveraging the crowds, the anonymity. Reynolds tapped a photo. We need to know the source, distribution network. Who is manufacturing this stuff? Ava remembered Bucharest, the sting of chlorine in the air, the press of bodies in the abandoned warehouse, the failure. She quickly tamped down the memory. Bucharest was a ghost she carried, a weight she measured every operation against. She couldn't afford to revisit it now, not when lives were potentially at stake. You want me to find the dealers. More than that, we don't even know what Bloom does consistently, what it looks like, what it smells like. We need a detailed profile. What are the initial signs of use? How long before symptoms manifest? Is there anything that distinguishes a user from someone simply enjoying the music? Reynolds' gaze was laser, focused. You're our best bet, Ava. You blend, you observe, you get close, and if I find something, you flag it discreetly. We'll have a team nearby. Unmarked cars, plainclothes officers. We'll move in. Ava closed the file. The image of the vacant-eyed girl burned into her mind. What about extraction, if things go south? Reynolds gave a fractional smile. You're resourceful, Agent West. You'll figure it out. The diner felt smaller. Now, the aroma of stale coffee and fried grease, suddenly oppressive. She needed to prepare, to build a persona, to disappear. The flashback came in fragments, a strobe light cutting through smoke, voices muffled and distorted. The acrid tang of burning plastic, the weight of a silenced Glock in her hand. She'd been younger then, fresh out of the academy, brimming with confidence. The operation, a complex infiltration of a human trafficking ring operating through underground nightclubs, had gone sideways fast. A miscalculated move, a compromised informant, and suddenly she was pinned down, outnumbered, the faces of the victims haunting her as the room dissolved into chaos. She'd gotten out, barely, but the cost was a knot of guilt and a pervasive sense of unease that clung to her like a second skin. She hadn't been able to save them all. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the memory away. Bucharest, a reminder that good intentions paved with recklessness led to ruin. She wouldn't make that mistake again. The assignment parameters Reynolds had provided detailed the cover story. Amelia Hayes, freelance music journalist for a small online blog called Echo Static, specializing in emerging artists, specifically within the electronic music scene. A hastily assembled website, complete with half-hearted reviews and a generic bio, was already live. Reynolds had even secured her a press pass. Credibility is essential, he said. Don't stick out. Don't ask questions that draw attention. Be the fly on the wall. Ava spent the next 48 hours immersed in the world of electronic music. She devoured articles, listened to setlists, memorized artist names, and learned the terminology: foodie, drops, builds, synths, bass lines. She needed to sound like she belonged. She needed to be Amelia Hayes. Bloom was the wrench in the works. Avoiding questions about it, deflecting inquiries, would be part of the performance. She had to appear genuinely interested in the music, oblivious to the danger lurking beneath the surface. Grant Park, an estimated 100,000 people packed shoulder to shoulder, a churning sea of bodies bathed in the late afternoon sun. The bass from the main stage vibrated in Ava's chest, a relentless physical force. The air was thick with the smell of sunscreen, sweat, and something else, a cloying sweetness she could quite place. She navigated the crowd, her backpack containing a hidden camera and audio recorder feeling heavy on her shoulders. Amelia Hayes scribbled notes in a small pad, occasionally glancing up to feign engagement with the music. She already conducted a few superficial interviews with lesser-known DJs, carefully steering the conversation away from anything remotely related to drugs. The energy was intense, a raw, almost primal exuberance. People were losing themselves in the music, surrendering to the collective rhythm. It was exhilarating and terrifying at the same time. This many people, this much energy, created a unique and dangerous anonymity, perfect for something like Bloom to spread. She forced a smile, mimicking the carefree expressions around her. It felt wrong, a performance within a performance. She was an observer, a hunter in a world of revelers. She paused near a vendor selling water bottles, scanning the crowd. She'd been instructed to look for specific signs: dilated pupils, erratic behavior, excessive sweating, slurred speech. But Bloom was unpredictable. The symptoms could be subtle, mimicking intoxication or simply the effects of exhaustion. A group of teenagers passed by, laughing and jostling each other. One of the girls, barely 18, had a glazed look in her eyes and was struggling to keep up with her friends. Ava dismissed it, probably just tired. Another group, all wearing matching neon-colored outfits, were dancing with unnerving intensity, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Again, she wrote it off. The music was loud, the atmosphere chaotic. She walked towards the Kidsapalooza area, designated for families. The contrast was jarring. Here, the air was lighter, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and the scent of cotton candy, a momentary respite from the pulsing energy of the main stages. But even here, she noticed a few attendees who seemed off. A man sitting alone on a bench, staring blankly ahead. A woman attempting to play with her child, but unable to focus. Ava continued her circuit, making her way towards the Perry's stage, a smaller venue showcasing art and coming artists. She paused to take a photo of the stage. Discreetly activating the camera in her backpack, she was cataloging everything, every face, every interaction, every detail. She overheard snippets of conversations. "Did you score?" "Nah, not yet. Heard it is going around. It is the only way to really feel it, you know." The hairs on the back of her neck prickled. Close. She was getting closer. She subtly adjusted her position, inching towards the source of the conversation. Two young men, both in their early 20s, were leaning against a barricade, their voices low and conspiratorial. "I heard it makes the lights brighter," one of them said, his eyes wide with anticipation. Yeah, and the bass, it is like it goes right through you. Just be careful, man. I heard someone odd last night. Don't worry about it. I got a buddy who knows a guy. Ava pretended to adjust her camera bag, subtly angling it towards them. She needed to get a better look at their faces. She needed to see if they were making a transaction. Suddenly, a commotion erupted a few feet away. A young woman, dressed in a glittering crop top and shorts, stumbled and fell to the ground. Their faces etched with concern. "Hey, are you okay?" one of them asked, shaking her gently. The woman didn't respond. Her eyes were rolling back in her head. Her breathing was shallow and ragged. Ava moved closer, her instincts screaming. This wasn't just intoxication. This was something else, something far worse. The woman's skin was flushed, almost crimson. Her lips were turning blue. Her body began to convulse, her limbs jerking uncontrollably. Her friends were screaming for help, their voices lost in the roar of the music. And then, her eyes locked onto Ava's a fleeting moment of lucidity, followed by a terrifying blankness. The woman's body went completely still. Her friends frantically tried to rouse her, but it was no use. She wasn't breathing. A wave of icy dread washed over Ava. This was it. This was Bloom. And it was far more dangerous, and far faster acting than she'd been led to believe. The metallic tang of blood lingered in the air, even over the cloying sweetness of festival concessions. Paramedics swarmed the collapsed woman, their movements frantic and efficient. Ava stood back, blending into the panicked crowd, her journalist's facade firmly in place. She activated the audio recorder in her backpack, capturing the chaos. "Just collapsed, man." Out of nowhere, a young man with bright pink hair stammered to a police officer. He'd been one of the woman's friends. She was fine, dancing, having a good time. Then just dropped. "Did she take anything?" the officer asked, his voice weary. He'd likely seen this before. "Just water, I swear, maybe a little energy drink." His voice lacked conviction. Ava approached, notepad and pen in hand. "Excuse me," she said, adopting a concerned tone. "I'm Amelia Hayes with Echo Static. I'm just trying to understand what happened." The pink-haired youth eyed her with suspicion. "She didn't take anything." "Seriously, I'm not accusing anyone," Ava said smoothly. "I just want to know if she seemed unwell beforehand. Any signs of disorientation, nausea, anything at all?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "She was kinda spacey, I guess," said the bass was hitting different. "But everyone says that, right?" "Did she mention anything about a new drug? Something people are calling Bloom?" The youth's eyes widened. "Whoa, how did you know about that?" "It is just a rumor. People say it makes everything intense." "I've heard whispers," Ava said, carefully non-committal. "Do you know anyone who has tried it?" He shook his head vehemently. "No way. That stuff's dangerous. I heard someone almost died last night." The interview yielded little concrete information, but it confirmed her suspicions. Bloom was gaining traction, fueled by dangerous curiosity and youthful recklessness. She needed a different angle. The official channels were moving too slowly. She needed to tap into the festival's undercurrents, the network of whispers and rumors that flowed beneath the surface. She found a potential source near the K-pop stage, Old Man Tiber, a wizened street vendor who'd been selling overpriced water bottles at Lollapalooza for the past decade. He was a fixture, a silent observer who seemed to see everything. "Heard about the girl," Tiber said, barely glancing up from polishing a plastic bottle. His voice was raspy, weathered like the bricks of a forgotten building. "You've heard about Bloom," handing him a $5 bill for a bottle of water she didn't need. "Heard enough. Bad medicine comes from the north side. They say a chemist, some college kid gone rogue, started cooking it up in a basement lab." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Now they're selling it like candy. Do you know who is distributing it here? Tiber shook his head. That little bird is information that costs extra, and even then, I don't play with fire. He pointed a gnarled finger towards a cluster of tents and scaffolding. Look around. Follow the money. Follow the shadows. That is where you'll find your answers. Ava spent the next hour cataloguing faces. Years of DR training kicked in. She scanned the crowd, focusing on subtle cues, furtive glances, whispered conversations, hand-to-hand exchanges. She identified a few potential young men with slicked back hair and expensive watches, moving through the crowd with an air of confidence and purpose. One in particular caught her attention. He was tall, muscular, with a distinctive tattoo of a coiled serpent on his forearm. He was making brief, discreet stops, exchanging small packages for cash. She tried to follow him, but the crowd was too dense. He vanished into a labyrinth of food stalls and merchandise booths. She'd need a better vantage point. That is when she met Julian Vance. He appeared as if summoned by her thoughts, materializing beside her with a disarming smile. He was the festival promoter, a charismatic figure draped in designer clothes, exuding an aura of effortless cool. Enjoying the show? He asked, his voice smooth as silver. It is overwhelming, Ava admitted, carefully gauging his reaction. That is the point, Vance chuckled. Sensory overload, an escape from reality. He extended a hand. Julian Vance, I'm responsible for all this glorious chaos. Ava shook his hand, noting the firmness of his grip. Amelia Hayes, writing for Echo Static. Ah, the press, always sniffing around for a story. He raised an eyebrow. What brings you to Lollapalooza, Miss Hayes? Just trying to capture the vibe, she said, hoping it sounded convincing. The energy, the music, the people, excellent. And what is your impression so far? It is intense, a lot of energy. She deliberately kept her answers vague, testing the waters. Vance leaned closer, lowering his voice. It can be. There are elements we try to keep contained, you understand. What kind of elements? He smiled. A flash of something cold in his eyes. Let's just say this is a space where people come to express themselves. And sometimes that expression involves things that aren't entirely legal. Ava pushed further. I've heard whispers about a new drug, something called Bloom. Vance's smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed. Bloom, never heard of it. His denial felt rehearsed, too smooth. She filed it away. It is funny, she continued casually. I was interviewing some attendees earlier, and a few mentioned feeling unusually affected by the music, like it was amplified. That is the sound system, he said dismissively. We spared no expense. Ava studied him, trying to read his tells. He was too polished, too practiced. He was hiding something. As she prepared to disengage, a security guard approached, his face stern. He was a large man, built like a brick wall, with a permanent scowl etched into his features. Excuse me, miss, he said, his voice gruff. I don't recognize you. Are you authorized to be back here? Ava's heart leaped into her throat. This wasn't good. She hadn't anticipated a security check. Her press pass was valid, but she hadn't been overly diligent about displaying it. I'm with Echo Static, she said, fumbling for her press pass. I'm here to cover the festival. The guard scrutinized her pass. His eyes narrowed. Never heard of that publication. Independent blog, Ava said, trying to remain calm. We focus on emerging artists. He continued to stare at her, suspicion radiating from his gaze. Let me see some of your work. Some articles you've written. Ava froze. She'd anticipated questions about her credentials, but not this. She hadn't prepared any fabricated articles for Echo Static. Reynolds had emphasized blending in, not creating a comprehensive journalistic portfolio. I left my laptop at the hotel," she stammered. The guard's eyes glinted with suspicion. "That is convenient. I think we need to take you back to security headquarters for further questioning." Just as he reached for her arm, a distraction, a fight broke out nearby, a chaotic tangle of limbs and shouting. The guard's attention was immediately diverted. "Stay here," he barked, before rushing towards the disturbance. Ava didn't hesitate. She melted back into the crowd, her pulse pounding in her ears. That was a close call, too close. She'd underestimated the level of security. She needed to be more careful. Back in the relative calm of a portable restroom line, she checked her phone. A new message from an unknown number. The text was short, cryptic. "Shipment arrives tonight. Pier 97. Be discreet." Pier 97, an abandoned industrial area on the Chicago River, a place with shadows and secrets, a place where Bloom was likely to change hands. She deleted the message immediately. Her mind racing. Who sent it? Was it a trap, a setup, or a genuine lead? She didn't know. But she knew one thing for sure. Tonight, the music would be drowned out by something far more sinister, and she was walking right into the heart of it. The rain returned, a cold, persistent drizzle that slicked the concrete of Pier 97. It matched the mood. The abandoned warehouse district felt like a forgotten corner of the city. A place where shadows clung to the decaying brickwork and the air tasted of rust and regret. Ava parked her unmarked sedan 2 blocks away, the engine idling softly. Reynolds hadn't. T authorized a full team deployment. "Too risky," he said. "Too much collateral damage potential. You go in, observe, report. If it escalates, disengage." Easy for him to say. He was safe in a climate-controlled command center, while she was about to walk into the unknown. The anonymous text had been precise. Pier 97, tonight. No time specified, but she'd arrived early, wanting to get a feel for the location. The pier stretched into the murky water of the Chicago River, a skeletal finger pointing towards the city skyline. The warehouse itself was a hulking mass of corrugated metal and broken windows, a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. She'd circled it twice already, noting the lack of security cameras and the limited access points. She chose a vantage point behind a stack of shipping containers. Obscured by the driving rain, the containers offered partial cover, blocking her from direct view, but also limiting her visibility. She adjusted the night vision goggles attached to her backpack, the world resolving into shades of green and grey. For the first hour, nothing. Just the rhythmic lapping of waves against the pier and the distant drone of city traffic. She began to doubt the tip. Had she been led on a wild goose chase? Then, a flicker of movement. A dark van, its windows tinted black, pulled up to the warehouse. It parked in the loading bay, the engine cutting out with a soft sigh. 2 figures emerged from the van, their faces obscured by the rain and the shadows. They moved with a practiced efficiency, unloading large duffel bags from the vehicle and carrying them inside the warehouse. They were followed by another 2 figures who began to stack cardboard boxes near the loading bay. The boxes were unmarked, uniform in size. Ava's pulse quickened. This was it. She activated the camera in her backpack, focusing on the activity in the loading bay. She needed clear images of the individuals involved, the van's license plate, and the contents of the boxes. As she zoomed in on one of the duffel bags, she caught a glimpse of something metallic glinting inside. Not the sleek chrome of electronics, but the dull, cold gleam of plastic packaging. Drugs. Definitely drugs. She decided to get closer to confirm her suspicions. She crept along the perimeter of the warehouse, staying hidden in the shadows. The rain continued to fall, plastering her hair to her forehead. and soaking through her jacket. She rounded a corner and found herself face to face with one of the distributors, a young man with a shaved head and a menacing glare. He was taking a smoke break, leaning against a stack of cardboard boxes. He spotted her immediately. "Who are you?" he demanded, his voice rough, her hand instinctively reaching for the Glock tucked into her waistband. She needed to de-escalate to maintain her cover. "Just taking a walk," she stammered, affecting a casual tone. "Enjoying the view." He didn't buy it. "You shouldn't be here. This is private property." "I didn't realize." She started to back away, hoping to avoid a confrontation. But he blocked her path, his eyes narrowing. "You a cop?" "No, I told you, I'm just." Before she could finish, he lunged at her, shoving her against the wall. She reacted instinctively, twisting away and delivering a sharp elbow to his jaw. He stumbled backwards, clutching his face. The sudden attack alerted the others. 2 more distributors rushed towards her, their faces contorted with anger. She was outnumbered. She engaged, relying on her training, a quick series of jabs and kicks aimed at vulnerable points. She wasn't trying to inflict serious harm, just to create an opening. She managed to disorient one of the distributors, sending him sprawling, but the other one was bigger, stronger. He grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Pain shot up her shoulder. She struggled, trying to break free, but his grip was like a vise. Just when she thought she was losing control, a loud noise from inside the warehouse distracted him. A shouting match, followed by the sound of crashing metal. He hesitated, glancing towards the source of the commotion. That was all she needed. She used his momentary distraction to break his grip, spinning away and sprinting towards the warehouse. She slipped inside through a partially open loading bay door, avoiding the ongoing confrontation. The interior of the warehouse was vast and cavernous, filled with stacks of cardboard boxes and shadowy corners. The air was thick with the smell of damp concrete and something else, a chemical odor that stung her nostrils. She moved quickly, weaving through the maze of boxes. She needed to find the drugs to gather evidence. She stumbled upon a small office. Tucked away in the back of the warehouse, a single desk lamp illuminated the room, casting long, distorted shadows. On the desk she saw it. A ledger, bound in black leather, filled with meticulously handwritten notes. She snatched it up, flipping through the pages. It was a detailed record of the drug's distribution network, listing names, addresses, amounts, and dates. It was a goldmine. But the writing wasn't what caught her attention. It was the encrypted codes interspersed throughout the ledger. Numbers and symbols that seemed to have no obvious meaning. She needed to decipher them. Suddenly, she heard shouts, footsteps approaching. The distributors were coming. She quickly scanned the office, looking for a place to hide. But there was nowhere to go. She stuffed the ledger into her backpack, slinging it over her shoulder. She made a dash for the loading bay door, hoping to escape undetected. But she was too late. One of the distributors spotted her, blocking her path. "Going somewhere," he sneered, his hand reaching for a metal pipe, leaning against a nearby wall. Ava braced herself for another fight. But then, a voice boomed from the warehouse entrance. "Hold it right there." A tall, imposing figure stepped into the loading bay. Vance, the festival promoter. He was accompanied by 2 security guards, both armed. "What is going on here?" Vance demanded, his voice cold and authoritative. The distributor hesitated, dropping the pipe. She is a trespasser, sir." Vance's gaze swept over Ava, his expression unreadable. "Is that so?" He paused, then turned to the distributor. "Take care of the shipment. I'll handle this." The distributor nodded and disappeared back into the warehouse. Vance approached Ava, his movements deliberate and menacing. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Hayes. This is a private matter. I was just investigating, she said, trying to maintain her composure. I'm a journalist. A journalist? Interesting. He reached out and grabbed her backpack, his fingers digging into her shoulder strap. What is in here? Ava tensed, anticipating a search. She couldn't let him find the ledger. He began to unzip the backpack, his eyes fixed on its contents. In a desperate attempt to distract him, she shoved him backwards, knocking him off balance. He stumbled, dropping the backpack. The ledger tumbled out, landing, open, on the concrete floor. Before she could react, Vance's security guards were upon her, grabbing her arms and pinning her against the wall. Vance bent down and picked up the ledger, his gaze scanning the pages. He stopped at a particular entry, his expression changing from curiosity to something darker, something furious. He traced a finger along a line of coded numbers, then looked up at Ava, his eyes blazing. So, he said, his voice dangerously quiet, Vev, been digging a little too deep, haven't you? He flipped the page, revealing a partial decryption she hadn't noticed before. A series of names cross-referenced with monetary amounts, and at the very top of the list, underlined in red ink, Vance, Julian $20,000. The sterile white of the interrogation room felt suffocating, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of Lollapalooza. Ava sipped lukewarm coffee, still reeling from the encounter at Pier 97. Reynolds had chewed her out for the near, stressing the importance of maintaining cover. But she secured the ledger, and that was the priority. Vance is clean, Reynolds had stated flatly after a preliminary background check. Successful businessman, legitimate investments, a few minor traffic violations, but nothing serious. Ava knew better. The look in Vance's eyes, the way he'd reacted to the ledger, told her he was far from clean. Reynolds' assessment felt incomplete. Conveniently so. Dig deeper, she'd insisted. There is something he is not telling us. And she'd started digging. The initial results were revealing. Vance's corporate holdings were a labyrinthine mess of shell corporations and offshore accounts. He'd made his fortune in real estate, flipping properties in economically depressed areas, often forcing out long-time residents. There were rumors of connections to organized crime, whispers of bribery and intimidation. Nothing concrete, but enough to raise red flags. His philanthropy was a carefully curated image. He donated generously to local charities, posing for photo ops with smiling children. But a closer examination revealed that the majority of his donations went to organizations he controlled, allowing him to exert influence and control. He was a puppet master, pulling strings from the shadows, and Ava was beginning to suspect that Bloom was just one piece of his game. She needed access to Vance, to his inner circle, to the truth, and the best way to get access was to play the part. Amelia Hayes, the intrepid music journalist. She leveraged her newly minted press credentials to score an invitation to a VIP party hosted by Vance that evening. The event was held in a secluded area of Grant Park, cordoned off from the general public. A sea of designer clothes, expensive cocktails, and carefully crafted smiles. Ava navigated the crowd, keeping her eyes peeled. She spotted Vance holding court in a corner booth, surrounded by admirers. He looked every inch the charismatic host, effortlessly charming and impossibly smooth. She made her way towards him, deliberately bumping into a tall, muscular man as she approached. "Oh, excuse me," she said, flashing a disarming smile. The man didn't respond, his gaze cold and calculating. He was Vance's security, she guessed, another piece of the puzzle. "Ms. Hayes, how lovely to see you again," Vance said, rising to greet her. His grip was firm, his eyes assessing. "Enjoying the party?" "It is exclusive," she said, carefully measuring her words. "You've curated quite the atmosphere." He chuckled. It is about creating an experience, something memorable. I understand you have a diverse portfolio, she said, steering the conversation towards his business interests. Real estate, technology, quite impressive. Diversification is key, he replied, his smile unwavering. It is about identifying opportunities and capitalizing on them. I've heard you've been involved in a lot of urban development projects, she continued, probing for weaknesses, revitalizing neglected neighborhoods. Exactly, bringing opportunity to communities that need it most. Some would say gentrification, she countered, her voice carefully neutral. His smile tightened. Progress often requires change. You can't make an omelette without breaking a few eggs. It was a click, delivered with calculated precision. He was skilled at deflecting, at controlling the narrative. What about your involvement with the festival? She asked, changing tack. It is quite an undertaking. I simply provide the platform, he said. I connect artists with audiences. It is a passion project. Do you oversee all aspects of security? He paused for a beat. Of course. We take the safety of our attendees very seriously. Ava studied him, searching for a tell. He was too smooth, too controlled. She couldn't break him. Not yet. She excused herself, claiming to need another drink. She used the opportunity to explore the perimeter of the VIP area, her senses on high alert. She noticed a small, unmarked door tucked away behind a row of potted plants. It was out of place, incongruous with the opulent surroundings. Curiosity piqued. She slipped through the door and found herself in a narrow corridor. The air was stale and smelled of dust. She followed the corridor, which led to a heavy steel door. She pressed her ear against the door. Listening, she could hear muffled voices, the clinking of glass, the faint thumping of music. She tried the handle. It was locked. She fished out a small lock-picking kit from her backpack, a relic from her field training. She worked quickly, expertly manipulating the tumblers. After a few tense moments, the lock clicked open. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, furnished with plush velvet couches and low tables. Several people were gathered around a table, engaged in a hushed conversation. There were drug paraphernalia scattered about small plastic baggies, glass pipes, a pile of cash. This was a drug den, hidden in plain sight within the heart of the festival. She quietly backed out of the room, closing the door behind her. She needed to report this. Now, as she turned to leave, she bumped into someone. A woman, tall, lean, with piercing blue eyes and a predatory smile. She wore a black leather jacket and had a distinctive tattoo of a spiderweb on her wrist. Looking for something? The woman asked, her voice like ice. Ava recognized her. She'd seen her earlier, lingering near Vance, always watchful, always silent. She was Vance's enforcer, his personal bodyguard. Just lost my way, Ava stammered, trying to regain her composure. The woman's eyes narrowed. You don't belong here. I'm with the press, Ava said, flashing her press pass. The woman barely glanced at it. I know who you are, Miss Hayes. I've been watching you. A knot of fear tightened in Ava's stomach. She was exposed. She needed to get out. Now, she turned and sprinted back towards the exit, the woman in pursuit. She pushed through the crowd, dodging revelers and narrowly avoiding a collision with a waiter carrying a tray of champagne glasses. She burst out of the VIP area into the relative safety of the general admission crowd. She didn't stop running, weaving through the throngs of people, trying to lose her pursuer. She finally found a secluded corner behind the main stage and collapsed against a stack of amplifiers, gasping for air. Her heart was pounding in her chest. She needed to get back to Reynolds to report what she'd found, but first she needed to secure the evidence. She rummaged through her backpack, searching for the ledger. It was gone. Panic surged through her. She'd lost it. Somewhere between the warehouse and the VIP party, She'd lost the single most important piece of evidence. She frantically searched her backpack again, sifting through the contents. Nothing. Then she remembered. The confrontation with the woman in the hidden room, the jostling, the struggle. It must have fallen out during the chase. She had to go back, to retrieve the ledger, to risk everything. She took a deep breath, steeling herself. She was walking into a trap, but she had no choice. She retraced her steps, cautiously approaching the hidden room. The door was still ajar. She slipped inside, her hand instinctively reaching for her Glock. The room was empty, but on the desk, in the center of the room, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A faded, grainy image of her, taken years ago, during the failed operation in Bucharest. She hadn't seen that picture in years. She'd thought it had been destroyed. She stared at the photograph, her mind reeling. How had Vance gotten his hands on it? What did he want? As she looked closer, she noticed a small inscription written on the back of the photograph. In elegant, cursive handwriting, "Some ghosts refuse to stay buried." The photograph felt like a brand seared onto her skin. It wasn't just a reminder of Bucharest. It was a threat, a chilling declaration that her past hadn't stayed buried, that someone, Vance, had been watching her, cataloguing her failures. She found him backstage, overseeing the final set change for the headline act. He hadn't seemed surprised to see her. A chilling calmness radiating from him. "Looking for this?" he asked, holding up the ledger. It was pristine, untouched. He hadn't even bothered to hide it. It was a power play. "You stole it," Ava said, her voice tight with barely contained fury. He smiled, a predatory curve of his lips. "Stole. Such a harsh word. Let's say I safeguarded it. For a mutually beneficial arrangement, of course." "What do you want?" "Oh, I think you know exactly what I want, Agent West." He leaned closer, his voice a low murmur that was barely audible over the thumping bass. "Or should I say, Agent? Whatever alias you're currently operating under." Ava's jaw clenched. He knew everything. "Bucharest," he continued, savoring her discomfort. "A truly regrettable incident. So much potential. Wasted. A few innocent lives lost because of a miscalculation, a rookie mistake." He'd done his homework, meticulously researching her past, uncovering the trauma she'd tried so hard to bury. "I'm willing to overlook your indiscretion," he said, his eyes gleaming with malice, "in exchange for your cooperation." "Cooperation, yes. Complete and utter cooperation. You'll cease your investigation into Bloom. You'll dismiss any concerns about my busyness practices, and you'll provide me with any information you gather about potential threats. And if I refuse," he shrugged, "let's just say I have certain contacts within the Bureau. Contacts who would be very interested to learn about a certain failed operation in Eastern Europe. A rogue agent, operating outside of protocol, compromising a sensitive investigation. The fallout could be catastrophic for your career, Agent West." Blackmail, cold, calculated blackmail. He wasn't just protecting his empire, he was protecting himself. He knew the truth about Bucharest, and he was willing to use it to destroy her. "You're playing a dangerous game, Vance," she said, her voice trembling with rage. "You're putting thousands of lives at risk with that drug. Sentimentality, ill suits you, Agent," he retorted. "Bloom is simply a product, a response to demand, and as you well know, there will always be demand." Ava knew she was cornered. She couldn't reveal her cover without jeopardizing the entire investigation, but she couldn't succumb to his demands, not after everything she'd been through. "I need time to think," she said, stalling for time. Vance's smile widened. "Of course, but don't take too long. Time is of the essence. He turned to leave, dismissing her with a casual wave of his hand. Oh, and one more thing. Don't bother contacting Reynolds. He is unavailable. Ava's blood ran cold. Unavailable. What did that mean? She had to get out of there. To warn Reynolds. To alert the team. But Vance had anticipated her every move. She was surrounded by his security, his eyes and ears everywhere. She slipped away unnoticed, blending into the chaotic energy of the festival. But she knew she was being watched. She could feel their gaze on her back, cold and calculating. She tried to contact Reynolds on her secure phone, but the signal was jammed. Vance had thought of that too. She didn't have a team. She was on her own. She decided to make a break for the perimeter, to find a safe location to assess the situation and formulate a plan. But Vance intercepted her, appearing seemingly from nowhere. "Running away, Agent?" he asked, his voice laced with amusement. "That is not very professional." "Stay away from me," she said, her hand hovering near her Glock. Now, let's not be hasty. We can still come to an understanding. I'm not negotiating with you. You don't have a choice." He signaled to his security guards, who moved to flank her. Ava knew she was outnumbered, but she wasn't going down without a fight. She sprinted towards the main stage, weaving through the throngs of festival. Goers, the music was deafening, the crowd a sea of swaying bodies. Vance and his security guards were in pursuit, pushing through the crowd, their faces contorted with anger. The chase was chaotic, a blur of flashing lights and pounding bass. Ava used her agility and training to navigate the obstacle course, dodging revelers and leaping over barricades. She scrambled onto one of the speaker stacks, using it as a temporary vantage point. Vance's security guards weren't as nimble. They struggled to keep up, colliding with concert-goers and tripping over equipment. She finally reached the edge of the stage, overlooking the main crowd. She had a momentary reprieve, a chance to catch her breath, but Vance was right behind her. He appeared on the stage, his face grim. "It is over, Agent," he said, his voice amplified by the sound system. "There is nowhere left to run." She turned to face him, her eyes blazing with defiance. "Not while I still have anything to fight for." She lunged at him, delivering a swift kick to his chest. He stumbled backwards, momentarily stunned. She followed up with a series of jabs and punches, aiming for his head and torso. He parried her attacks, his movements surprisingly quick for a man of his size. He retaliated with a powerful haymaker, catching her on the side of the head. She staggered, her vision blurring. He seized the opportunity, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back. Pain shot up her shoulder, almost immobilizing her. She struggled to break free, but his grip was unrelenting. He pinned her against the stage's soundboard, his face inches from hers. "You should have listened to me, Agent," he whispered. "Now you're going to regret it." Just when she thought she was defeated, a figure emerged from the shadows. The woman with the spider-web tattoo, Vance's enforcer. She moved with a predatory grace, her eyes locked on Ava. In her hand, she held a silver pistol, its barrel glinting under the stage lights. "Enough, Isabella," Vance said, his voice strained. He was enjoying this far too much. Isabella ignored him, her gaze unwavering. She raised the pistol, aiming directly at Ava's head. "Last chance, Agent," Vance said, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Or face the consequences." The roar of the crowd faded into a dull hum. The music seemed to slow, the rhythm of the festival dissolving into a terrifying silence. Ava stared down the barrel of the gun. She had a split second to make a decision, reveal her cover, alerting the authorities, and potentially jeopardizing the investigation, or succumb to Vance's demands and become an accomplice to his crimes. Her hand tightened around the grip of her own weapon. But before she could make her move, Isabella's finger tightened on the trigger. The click of the hammer breaking the tension felt less like a reprieve and more like a delayed shockwave. But the muzzle flash never came. Instead, a hand, strong and swift, clamped down on Isabella's wrist, diverting the shot skyward. "Don't move, Agent Rossi," a voice commanded, crisp and authoritative. Ava blinked, momentarily disoriented. Standing behind Isabella, her own pistol drawn, was a woman she hadn't expected to see. 40 Agent Davies. From the Bureau's Special Operations Unit, she'd worked with Davies briefly during a training exercise a few years back. "Davies," Ava stammered, her voice hoarse. "We've been watching Vance for months," Davies said, her eyes fixed on Isabella. "We knew he was involved in something big, but we couldn't pinpoint it. You did the heavy lifting, Agent West." Isabella, her face a mask of fury, struggled against Davies' grip. "He is a liar. He told me she was a threat. He is a manipulator, Rossi. He uses people, you included." Davies expertly disarmed Isabella, securing her wrists behind her back. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, distribution of narcotics, and attempted murder." The realization washed over Ava like a cold wave. She hadn't been alone. There had been other players involved, operating in the shadows. "Vance," she asked, turning to the stunned festival promoter. "It seems my little operation has been compromised," Vance said, his voice devoid of emotion. His carefully constructed facade had finally crumbled, revealing the cold, calculating man beneath. Davies signaled to the remaining security guards, who quickly subdued Vance and his remaining associates. The scene descended into chaos, a flurry of handcuffs and shouted commands. "Get medical teams to the affected areas," Davies ordered, "and start a full sweep of the festival grounds. I want every dose of Bloom confiscated, every single one." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Paramedics swarmed the festival, providing medical assistance to those who had fallen victim to Bloom. Undercover agents, working alongside local law enforcement, scoured the grounds, confiscating the drug and arresting anyone connected to the distribution network. Ava found herself assisting with the sweep, her journalistic cover officially blown. She didn't mind. She was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was part of the solution. The damage was extensive. Dozens of festival goers had been hospitalized. Several were in critical condition, but thanks to the swift action of the authorities, a larger disaster had been averted. She stumbled upon a makeshift triage station set up near the main stage. Doctors and nurses were working tirelessly, treating patients and monitoring their vital signs. The air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and fear. She saw the pink-haired youth from yesterday, lying on a gurney, hooked up to an IV drip. He looked pale and shaken, but he was alive. She stopped to speak to one of the doctors. "How are they doing?" "It is a mixed bag," the doctor said, his voice weary. "Some are recovering nicely, others. Their prognosis is uncertain. Bloom caused some serious neurological damage. We're doing everything we can." Ava felt a pang of guilt. She'd been so focused on catching Vance. She hadn't fully grasped the human cost of his greed. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale glow over the festival grounds, Davies found Ava near the main stage, surveying the scene. "You did good, West," Davies said, offering a rare smile. "You took down a dangerous man and prevented a lot of harm." "It could have been worse," Ava said, her voice somber. "A lot worse." "Reynolds is furious," Davies said, her smile fading. "He wants to know why you went rogue, why you didn't follow protocol." "I had a feeling Vance was involved," Ava explained. "I just needed proof. You were right. He has been on our radar for a while. But we couldn't connect him to anything concrete. You provided the missing piece." "What about Bucharest?" Ava asked, finally addressing the elephant in the room. "Did he have something to do with that?" Davies hesitated. "That is still under investigation. but we suspect he may have been providing intelligence to our targets, helping them evade capture. The revelation sent a jolt of anger through Ava. Vance wasn't just a drug dealer, he was a traitor. He'd been playing both sides, profiting from the chaos and destruction. "He almost destroyed me," Ava said, her voice trembling with rage. "We know," Davy said softly. "He underestimated you, and he paid the price." Just as Ava began to feel a sense of closure, her secure phone buzzed, interrupting their conversation. It was Reynolds. "West, I need you to listen carefully," Reynolds said, his voice grim. "We just received intel from Customs. They intercepted a shipment of chemical precursors heading to Chicago. It is a large quantity, enough to manufacture a significantly larger batch of bloom." Ava's heart sank. They dismantled Vance's network, but the source of the drug was still out there. "The shipment is being rerouted to a warehouse on the south side," Reynolds continued. "We need you to intercept it." "Is Isabella cooperating?" Ava asked. "She is giving us something, but she is holding back. We believe there is another player involved, someone higher up the chain, someone who provided Vance with the expertise and the resources to manufacture bloom." "What about the ledger?" Ava asked. "Any luck deciphering the codes?" "Partial decryption only," Reynolds said. "We've identified a few key figures, but there is still a lot we don't know." Ava stared out at the sprawling festival grounds, now deserted and littered with debris. The crowds had gone home, but the nightmare wasn't over. "Another shipment, Reynolds," she said, her voice laced with weariness. "Yes, West, and I have a feeling this one is going to be bigger than anything we've seen so far." The call ended, leaving Ava standing alone in the fading light. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. She looked towards the distant skyline, a sense of foreboding washing over her. She knew with a chilling certainty that she was about to face her greatest challenge yet. The echoes of Bucharest and the ghost of Julian Vance was still very much alive. The warehouse loomed, a hulking monolith of corrugated iron and broken glass on the desolate outskirts of Chicago. It was a far cry from the glittering lights of Lollapalooza, a fitting end to a case steeped in darkness. The air hung heavy with the smell of rain and decay. Ava stood beside Davies, watching as the FBI's tactical team prepared to breach the building. A perimeter had been established, floodlights illuminating the surrounding area, casting long, distorted shadows. "Intel suggests our mastermind is inside," Davies said, her voice low. "Dr. Alistair Finch, a former pharmaceutical researcher fired from his university for unethical experiments. He is the one who figured out how to synthesize bloom, and he has been supplying Vance with the ingredients for months." "A scientist," Ava said, her voice flat. "He is considered highly intelligent and extremely dangerous. He is also heavily armed, and he has a history of paranoid behavior." Ava adjusted her vest, checking the magazine in her Glock. She wasn't on the front line this time, but she was ready to assist if needed. The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, a familiar companion. "Let's go," Davies ordered, signaling the team to move. The breach was swift and decisive. A battering ram slammed into the loading bay door, splintering the wood and metal. The tactical team stormed inside, weapons drawn. Ava followed closely behind, her senses on high alert. The warehouse interior was a labyrinth of crates, barrels, and makeshift laboratories. The air was thick with the acrid smell of chemicals. They moved methodically through the building, clearing room after room. Finally, they reached a large open space in the center of the warehouse, and there he was, Dr. Alistair Finch. He was bent over a table, meticulously measuring out chemicals, oblivious to their presence. He was a gaunt, wiry man with wild, unkempt hair and a haunted look in his eyes. Davies signaled for the team to hold their fire. "Dr. Finch, you're under arrest." Finch didn't react. He continued to work, his movements precise and methodical. "I said, you're under arrest," Davies repeated, her voice louder this time. Finch finally looked up, his eyes glinting with madness. "You'll never understand," he said, his voice raspy. "I was on the verge of a breakthrough, a new era of pharmacology, but they silenced me. They tried to destroy me." "You created a monster, Finch," Ava said, her voice calm but firm. "You poisoned thousands of people." He ignored her, turning his attention back to his work. "Bloom isn't poison. It is an awakening. It allows people to experience reality in a new way. A more profound way." Suddenly, he reached under the table and pulled out a pistol. He raised it, aiming it at Davies. Before he could fire, one of the tactical team members opened fire, hitting Finch in the chest. He crumpled to the ground, the pistol clattering to the floor. The warehouse fell silent. The aftermath was anticlimactic. Finch was taken into custody, along with several of his associates. The remaining shipment of chemical precursors was secured. The Bloom network finally was dismantled. Ava stood outside the warehouse, watching as the evidence trucks pulled away. The rain had stopped, and a sliver of moon peeked through the clouds. She closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of quiet reflection. The case was over, but the scars remained. Bucharest. The memory still haunted her, a constant reminder of her past failures, the faces of the victims, the weight of her guilt. She'd carried that burden for years, allowing it to define her, to consume her. But something had shifted during this investigation. Confronting Vance, facing her demons, she'd finally begun to heal. She'd realized that she wasn't defined by her past. She was defined by her actions in the present. She'd made mistakes. But she'd also done good. She'd saved lives. She'd brought down a dangerous criminal. And she'd finally found a measure of peace. Davies joined her, offering a weary smile. "It is over, West. You can finally breathe." "I think I can," Ava said, returning the smile. "Reynolds is relieved," Davies said. "He is willing to admit you were right about Vance all along." "That is all I ever wanted," Ava said. "The truth." The following weeks were a blur of debriefings, reports, and psychological evaluations. Ava was cleared of any wrongdoing, and her stellar record was reinstated. But she knew things would never be quite the same. She requested a transfer, a less demanding assignment, something that would allow her to rebuild her life, to reconnect with the parts of herself she'd lost along the way. She was assigned to a small field office in Montana, overseeing investigations into wildlife trafficking. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful, and it was a world away from the shadows of Chicago. She started therapy, working through the trauma of her past. She reconnected with old friends, people she'd neglected during her years with the Bureau. She adopted a rescue dog, a scruffy terrier named Lucky. Slowly, gradually, she began to rebuild her life. Months later, Ava stood on the balcony of her small cabin in the Montana mountains. Overlooking the city of Missoula, the lights twinkled in the distance, a constellation of hope and promise. She sipped a cup of hot tea, breathing in the crisp mountain air. Lucky lay at her feet, snoring softly. She thought about Bucharest, about Vance, about the darkness she'd faced. It wasn't gone. It would always be a part of her, but it no longer controlled her. She was a survivor. She was a fighter. And she was finally truly free. She looked up at the stars, a sense of gratitude washing over her. The night was quiet, peaceful. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees. Ava smiled. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace. The echoes of the past had finally faded.